So good morning, everyone. Welcome to our webinar live series. Our webinar today is going to be focused on something that we care deeply about at Parsec, which is all about the quantitative data, and then your qualitative student voice. And so being able to have the leadership courage to take to the board, is something that we'll talk about today. And so the person who will be leading this conversation is going to be Natalie with us, who is our partner at Claremont Unified. But before we get into everything, just a few housekeeping items. Today's session is going to be recorded, so you will get an email with the recording and the slides. And then we love engagement. So if you have any questions that may pop up, any thoughts, any comments, feel free to use the chat to interact with everyone on the Zoom. And then Esteban will be here to help moderate through the chat. Today, she'll be walking through how she used our analytics dashboard to help with her data narrative at her district. She'll show us some actual examples of how their student voice helped with their LCAP planning and their grant writing. She'll also share the beautiful lessons that came out of rolling out our tool across their school sites and her principal teams. And then she'll end the session with sharing some ideas on how to get your staff engaged and also in alignment when you're rolling out data tools. And so with that, I'll pass it on to you, Natalie, to get us started.
Thank you, Shay, so much for having me. I'm so excited. It is always weird to listen to the bio that you wrote about yourself, right? Like here are all the things that I did. But it is certainly my work and my passion is surrounding equity in education. Always has been from the moment I was thrown into this field because, like so many of us, I was not ever going to be an educator. But my mom was, so here I am. Fun fact, we became principals within a month of each other. So that is certainly part of our upbringing. But I have been here in Claremont Unified. We're in Southern California. I've been here literally since I was born. My dad went to Claremont schools. My kids go to the same school that my dad went to. All three schools, elementary, junior high, and high school. So this community is one that I'm deeply invested in. And it's one that I'm really proud to do this work in. And Parsec has just been this incredible tool to marry the equity work that I'm so passionate about with the data work that I'm kind of nerdy about. And so I'm really excited to pair those two together. So a little bit about Claremont. We are a town in LA County, easternmost LA County. We have about 6,000 students. And like many places, that number is decreasing. When I started working here, we were at over 7,000. Um, Currently, our numbers show, and this is based on last year's data, and I'll share how it's changing, that 36% of our students are socioeconomically disadvantaged. Our new number that we're going to be working with next year is 45%. So we're seeing our demographics certainly shift. We stay close to about 5% of our students receiving English learner services, but about 20% of our students coming to us with exposure to a language other than English. Our students with disabilities number is rising. It's pretty high, 16%. We're at 17% next year. And then our homeless and foster youth population, while not very high, is certainly one that we pay close attention to. Go ahead to the next slide and you'll see our racial demographics. As you mentioned, my doctoral research is in heightening racial consciousness, so I pay a lot of attention to this information on a macro and a micro level, right? So really thinking through what do our numbers show for proportionality purposes, and then who are our students for relationship purposes. Our Hispanic population is growing. We're at about almost 50% Hispanic and 26% white, and which is really interesting. We're a college community. We are called the City of Trees and PhDs. And so we've got this great, rich community. And when you ask community members the population that we serve, in people's heads, a lot of times that is a majority white population. And when they see these numbers, they're kind of surprised at the students that are sitting in our public schools. We have a growing number of students who identify as two or more races, which is an interesting statistic to kind of pay attention to. Who are those students? And that's why it's so important to get to know who these kiddos are. Our Asian population stays steady at about 11%, and our African American population or Black population is anywhere between 4 and 5%. But as we see our two or more races category move up, we're seeing some other shifts in other demographics. All right, next slide. One of the very unique and special things about Claremont Unified is our core values. We have stated core values of excellence, equity, innovation, and integrity. They were decided upon by our community, and we have a board adopted equity statement. So our Board of Education has this on posters in every classroom. It's on billboards in our district office. It's in our boardroom. And the work that we do is really driven by this statement. It is very exciting because a lot of the words in here were actually crafted by students. So if we look at the end of the first paragraph, the idea of disability, we wanted a way to show that we're paying attention to students with disabilities, but we're really looking at abilities of all types. And so one of our students said, well, why don't we write it this way? And we really loved that because it brought student voice into that work. But we really are, that last sentence I think is really important, is that we recognize, acknowledge, and address individual and institutional oppression and injustice. And what we're able to do with Parsec is really look at that institutional piece, how are our big numbers looking, but also that individual piece of what are our kids saying? What are those individual voices? And so we'll talk about how both of those really play into the equity work that CUSD is doing. This is probably my favorite tool with Parsec, is the ranking. We are, like many folks, quite competitive. And so when we are able to really drill down our school district, Claremont Unified, in relationship to school districts that look similar to us, we're able to see where we land. And we're really proud of the work that we do here. We are a high achieving district. We know that. We have folks that come to us from all over who transfer into Claremont to be in our schools because of the work that we're doing. And when we're able to say, okay, let's look at similar populations when it comes to students with disabilities, similar size enrollment, unified school districts with a similar SED population and a similar English learner percentage, we can see that we rank pretty high in the state of how we're doing. We're not number one. We see you, Brayo, Linda, but we are certainly doing well by the standards of our community. And we can see in LA County, we're doing pretty great. Third in ELA, second in math, but the next slide is what my work makes me so happy about. We are first when it comes to that equity matrix. And so while we reach out to our neighboring districts and we say, what are you doing in English language arts overall? What are you doing in math overall? We get those phone calls back from other folks that say, what are you doing to close gaps? Because we are certainly doing that. Our dashboard is 60% blue and green. That's really incredible because we have very specific folks who do very specific jobs to make sure that we're serving the needs of our individual student groups. And we want to make sure that that even those groups who we say are dashboard invisible are represented in the work that we do. So I mentioned earlier that we only have 4% of our population are Black or African American. We have no single school that has enough Black or African American students to have that show up on their dashboard, but we do as a district. And so we make sure that schools know just because a group doesn't show up on your dashboard doesn't mean that this group is not important. We need to make sure that we're serving the needs of all of our students. And because that, we can see what that translates to on our district dashboard. And that's this number that we're really, really proud of. So this is what we used to do when it comes to data. And I'm sure a lot of folks do this. There's nothing wrong with it. It was just the way that we navigated our goal writing. So this is an example of an achievement close or a gap closing goal that we have in our equity plan that I'll talk about in a little bit. And this is paying attention to CASP achievement levels in English language arts and math. And we know that we have student groups who are scoring below the district average when it comes to CASP, ELA, and math. And so our goal was very clear, like we want to increase English language arts and math scores for certain student groups by 3% annually. And that sounded like a really lofty goal when we wrote it. And we were very excited about it because we weren't seeing growth of 3% district-wide. Then we did. And we realized that when we see growth of 3% district-wide overall, making 3% growth for a specific student group doesn't close a gap, it just sustains a gap. And so in this example, you can see at the bottom that our overall change in ELA was 3.39%. We grew as a district 3.39%. So we could see that gaps were closing for our Hispanic or Latino population. They made a growth of 4.2. Our students with disabilities made a growth of 5.3. And so we had some growth there, right? It was closing gaps for those two student groups. And then in math, we made a big amount of growth for our students experiencing homelessness. And so we're closing some of those gaps that way. But that really told us who met the mark and who didn't. It didn't give us a lot more information than that. Did you pass CASP or not? So on the next slide, we're able to see what Parsec offered us. Parsec offered us the ability to look at our distance from standard for specific student groups and compare that over time. So we know on that previous slide that our Black students did not make the targeted growth when it came to ELA and math that we were hoping for, that 3%. And so some would say, well, then what you're doing with Black students isn't working because they didn't meet the targeted growth. And I may have agreed with them if I didn't have data to share a different narrative. And now that we do have Parsec, we can see a different narrative. So the first picture here shows our CASP trends for our Black students. And we can see in English language arts, we are making progress towards reaching that CASP MET mark, right? We're not there yet on an average score, but we are certainly inching closer, which tells us that the instructional strategies that we're using to support our Black students in English language arts are working. And if that trend continues, we will reach that distance from standard mark at 0, and we will move across that line like we did with our Hispanic or Latino students on the second picture. We can see that we flipped that and we are now above that 0 mark, and we're showing that the average student is passing CASP. We can see those trends in English language arts for our Black students, Hispanic and Latino students, our socioeconomically disadvantaged students. That has jumped dramatically, and our students experiencing homelessness. We look at our English learners and we can see what we're doing there might not be serving us in the way that we want to. Those instructional strategies need some work. And so instead of saying students did or didn't pass CASP, now we can say students are or are not making progress along the way. And we're taking into account every single student, not just those who are right on the border of passing CASP, focusing on those students who are those difference makers or vanilla kids or all the other things that I've heard. We're really looking at every single student's journey and how does that play into the instructional strategies that we're using and the data story that we're able to tell. And so we share this data with our Board of Education to say, here's what we're doing, here's what's working, and here's what's not. Let's own that because we need to revamp some of those strategies because we owe it to each of our kiddos. So that's our kind of analytic side of the house. We were able to look at CASP data in a very different way. And then we flip-flop over to our qualitative data side of the house. Our LCAP survey process is one that we very much value. You can see that in grades 4 through 6, we had almost 1,200 kids take our LCAP survey. And in 7 through 12, we had 2,500 kids take that survey. And this is a survey that we've been giving forever, right? We have been asking our students, and it's a Survey Monkey survey. It's a valid tool for us because it gives this big picture information. And we were able to see that, like always, kids are happy with school, they know their teachers care about them, and they think the bathrooms need some work and they generally don't like the food, right? That survey tells us the same thing every year. And it's important to look at those metrics and see how are we doing. But we were really excited to add Parsec Real this year to our survey process. And so on the next slide, we're able to see this is directly from a presentation that we gave to our Board of Education, updating them on student feedback. So in the past, what I would do is I would spend an LCAP season, I would spend the month of February visiting every one of our 10 campuses. And I would meet with student council, and I would meet with student unions, and I would meet with ASB, and I would go to English learner classes, and I would go to AP classes, and I would mix it up and go to as many different folks as I could go to. And I would host lunchtime sessions, and I would spend a month of my time meeting with kids and gathering feedback from them. And then I would come back and with my doctoral qualitative lens on, I would code all that data and I would try to come up with some themes that worked. And it would take a month of my time every single year. This year, and I asked the same questions every year. What's working? What's not? What do the adults need to know? That was it. This year, I was able to put it into a Parsec reel. What's working? What's not? What do the adults need to know? And we got so many different responses. I think 1,700 kids, which I would not have been able to meet with that many students in the month of February. And with a push of a button, the data was coded in a way that saved me a month of time, right? And gave us this information. What's working? Well, like the other survey told us, kids feel like their teachers are supportive, right? They have a positive school community. They like being here. School is fun for them. There are extracurriculars, sports, clubs, that sort of thing, right? What are some things that could improve? Again, some of the same information, lunches, bathrooms. Um, but this piece, the what do you want adults to know? This was new for us. And I don't know that we would have been able to get as much information about this idea had we not used Parsec Real. We were able to hear from kids about how educators need to understand the significant load that they carry, that they have a million things that they're working on, extracurriculars and homework and watching siblings and all of these things, and that their struggles are real. And I think as adults going into school settings, sometimes we can say, yeah, I remember being a kid too, and it was tough. And we have some of those biases of like, I've been in your shoes and I made it out, that don't allow us to pay particular attention to student words. And so with Parsec Real, I was able to take snapshots of student words and send that to folks to demonstrate this point. So go ahead, Shay, go to the next slide. So you can see here we had over 1,700 kids respond to this survey and 49, almost 5,000 individual responses. And it just took them 5 minutes, which is way less time than they would have been spending with me in a meeting because that would have lasted all lunch because we needed to give everyone a chance to talk. And what I love about what is circled in blue here is that I could see that 40% of the kids named this as a concern. That tells us something huge. The bathrooms and the lunches and all the things that we've been hearing about before, that was not nearly as high. That was in the like 15, 16, 17%. But 40% of our students feel like their teachers have to understand their stress and mental health. That's important data to give to our management team and to our principal team and to our mental health team and to our teachers and to our union and to everybody. 4 in 10 of your kids are feeling this, right? So as they walk into a classroom each day, this is what they feel. And then I can share their exact words. So if we go to the next slide, we'll see their exact words. This is so amazing. We can see that kids are like, you know what? Things are great. I feel great. That's awesome. And hey, listening to music helps me. That's wonderful. But I love this kid. Like, I don't need 3 pounds of homework to fill what's happening in my life. I'm good. right? Or teachers need to chill out on the homework because I've got 7 of them. We have kids that take 7 or 8 courses. They're feeling it. And I love this last sentence. Sometimes we're trying our best, even if it doesn't look like it. You have to know that about me as an adult. And then this one, some of us have extracurriculars and siblings to care for. One of the things that we found when we came out of the pandemic is that families, and rightly so, me as well, I'm a mom of 2, we threw our kids back into things, right? Your dance studio's open again, the fields are open again, practice is happening again. You can go to music class, you can go to these things, go do those things because you've missed it. And we didn't take some of the things off their plate. And so our kids have these really full, rich lives outside of homework. And when we are able to give information like this, we're able to then have conversations. This is now driving conversations. So at our next board meeting, our instructional leaders are giving a conversation on equitable grading practices and the importance of thinking through what we give our students to demonstrate what they have learned. Is it busy work or is it really intentional formative assessment? Let's think through these things together. And this data allows us to have that conversation that says, this is what our kids are asking for. And this is how we care for our students. We don't lower the bar, right? But we rethink what we do in our schools to support each one of these students and make it so that they have the ability to be successful in all of the things that they find important. So all of that works together in what we call our equity action plan. So every school district has an LCAP. We certainly have ours. We're in the middle of writing it now and sending it to the county. And when you get it back from the county, they want really specific details about unduplicated students only. That's what we're looking for because we're paying attention to supplemental funds. So we have, in addition to that, our equity action plan, which can be found on our website. It's public facing, but it really says we pay attention to every single one of our students with very clear intentionality about their individual success. And we do that in a way that is related to the LCAP, related to our strategic plan, related to each school's SIPSA, but really focused on how do we support individual student groups? How do we pay attention to student voice? And Parsec has just been this great tool to help us craft that narrative in a way that honors student voice, honors the progress, the academic progress that kids are making, even if they haven't met the mark yet. They are certainly on their way, and we can show that with clarity now as we have been able to partner with Parsec. So I'm happy to answer any questions and open it up to folks.
And Natalie, before we open it for Q&A, I just want to say thank you for sharing this work with all of us. I think you and the work that your team is currently doing is amazing. And we have a saying at Parsec, which is we measure what we value. And so when I think about that, I think everything that you did, looking at your indicators, what are the signals, looking at your resources and aligning them to your priority, but then also bringing voice to the table is exactly what is at the heart of that. And so, like, this is amazing work. I learned a lot. I'm sure everyone on the call learned a lot, but thank you for sharing what you and your team are doing because this is really good work. So with that, I wanted, yeah, now opening it for Q&A that you may have for Natalie. Let's see, we'll give it a couple. And while we're waiting, I did have a question for you, Natalie. When you were talking about the CASP trends per student group, were there any like out of the box ideas or strategies that you and your team did that worked or didn't work?
Yeah, well, I will say one of our a big area of focus for us has been supporting our Black students. And so we have a community of practice of educators that I get to facilitate, and it's folks at all different school sites. And we come together and we've done culturally responsive teaching training, and we've done a lot of coaching for equity and this type of work. And we weren't really seeing the numbers, the academic indicators weren't rising, right? We weren't looking at it the way we are able to look at it now. And so one of the things that three of our teachers decided that they wanted to do was start a Black affinity group to support Black students and families in our school district. And so that has just taken off this year, and that has been really, really incredible. We're able to share a lot of this data with families and then bring in families who have these tremendous amount of resource. I mentioned we're a college town. We have professors. We've got folks that are bringing in all of their resource, and now families are kind of leading the work of that group and looking at community curriculum and culture. And so that has really developed just this year with being able to dive into data a little bit more and say, this is a student group that we were not meeting the mark on. How do we then build something as a district to support what families will need? And so it's been really exciting to watch that grow.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And then we have one question on here. Shannon asked, are you able to input local benchmark assessment data and compare that alongside your CASP data? Does Parsec act as a data warehouse for any information?
Well, I can answer the first part of what we do. The answer is yes and yes. We share this information. This is our big picture overview. The slides that I pulled were for our board. But we look at this data. We look at IABs. So we have an IAB dashboard that we are able to look at all of the interim assessments that we give. We're able to look at CASP, LPAC. And then we also pull in iReady scores and star reading scores. And so we're able to look at all of that data down all the way down to a student level. So our principals use that when they are writing at our last principals meeting. We had principals diving into Parsec and pulling their iReady data, which we use as a benchmark, their star reading data, their interim assessment data, and they were using all of that data to craft their new goals for next year.
Thank you. And then Shannon, for the second part of your question, what I can do is I'll connect you with our technical solutions specialist, and he'll be able to answer, yeah, what you were asking, because we have some limitations, but for the most part, we say if you have it, we can visualize it. So, any other questions? That was a great question. Any other questions for anyone?
And I'll share, I was so excited. We were at a principal's meeting and our superintendent said, if somebody could get me this data in the next week or so. And I was like, here it is, like right at the meeting. And so it was really, really great to be able to say, yes, has all the data that we need.
Okay. All right. I don't think there's any other questions. So we'll go ahead and wrap up. I know we're actually almost at time. Um, Natalie, thank you so much for being a part of
Thank
this
you for
webinar
having
and
me.
sharing, what Claremont and your team are doing. And then thank you for everyone who joined us today. Esteban has put um, I'll say some chats in the chat. So if you have any questions, you can email us. He put a link for the past webinars that we've done. But thank you all for joining us. You will get a copy of the recording and the slides, and then I will be sure to share Natalie's contact in case you all want to reach out and ask any questions. But with that, enjoy the rest of your Wednesday and your week, and we'll see you all next Wednesday at 10 a.m.